Dr. Maya Richardson stood in the basement of the Smithsonian Institution, surrounded by cardboard boxes that smelled of dust and old paper. She had been working on the African American Heritage Photography Project for 3 months, sorting through thousands of pictures from the years after the Civil War. Most were damaged, faded, or hard to recognize. But on this morning in March 2019, she opened a box labeled Virginia Studios, 1880-1890, and found something that made her stop. The photograph was in very good condition. It showed a family of 6, sitting and standing in a formal studio pose. The background had a painted garden scene, which was common back then. The father stood tall in a dark suit, with one hand resting on the shoulder of his seated wife. 4 children were around them, 2 boys and 2 girls, all dressed in their best clothes. Their faces looked serious, proud, and almost royal. Maya picked up the photograph carefully and saw the photographer's stamp on the back. J. Morrison Studio, Richmond, Virginia, September 1888. She had seen many similar portraits, but this one felt special. The family's posture and the way they carried themselves showed a pride that went beyond their situation. She put the image on her light table and took out her magnifying glass to start her usual notes: age, condition, subjects, and location. When she looked closer, her breath stopped for a moment. The woman in the center, the mother, had the most striking eyes Maya had ever seen in an old photograph. Even with the sepia colors and the limits of 1880s photography, something was unusual about them. They had a sharpness and clarity that seemed impossible for that time. Maya sat back, puzzled. She knew the old cameras and film usually made eyes look dark and blurry, but this woman's eyes were clear, almost glowing, with a pattern in the irises that Maya could not quite see with just her magnifying glass. She checked the clock. It was almost noon. Her colleague, Dr. James Chen, worked in the digital imaging lab upstairs. If anyone could help her understand what she was seeing, it was him. Maya placed the photograph in a protective sleeve and went to the elevator. James looked up from his computer when Maya walked in with the sleeve. He knew that look on her face meant she had found something important. "What do you have there?" he asked, moving his chair back. "I'm not sure yet," Maya said, placing the photograph gently on the scanner. "But there is something special about this woman's eyes. Please scan it at the highest quality you can." James nodded and set up the high-resolution scanner made for old documents. The machine worked quietly, capturing every tiny detail of the 131-year-old picture. 5 minutes later, the scan showed on his screen. James opened it in special imaging software and zoomed in on the mother's face. Maya stood next to him, holding the back of his chair. "There," she whispered, pointing. "Do you see it?" James leaned in and zoomed even closer on her left eye. The iris filled the screen. What they saw left both of them quiet. The pattern was clear. Even after all those years, the structure showed deep lines, special colors, and a nearly geometric arrangement of shapes. "That's," James started, then stopped. He opened another program from the National Institutes of Health that recognized iris patterns for genetic studies. He entered the details from the photo, making adjustments for the old image. The software ran for 30 seconds, comparing it to thousands of records. When the results came up, James sat back quickly. "Maya, this pattern belongs to a very specific family line. It is extremely rare, appearing in less than 1% of people worldwide. It connects to an ancestral group from West Central Africa." Maya's heart beat faster. "Can you tell me more?" James clicked through more screens. "It points to Angola, especially the royal families of the old Nungo Kingdom." 2 days later, Maya sat with Dr. Patricia Okonjo in a small office at Howard University. Patricia was an expert in African American family histories, especially those from the time of slavery. Her walls were covered with family trees, maps of the slave trade, and photos of people she had helped. Maya showed her the original photograph and James's digital report. Patricia studied them carefully. "The iris pattern is clear?" she asked. "Yes. According to the database, Maya replied. This pattern is linked to the royal line of the Ndongo kingdom. I know that history, Patricia said. Queen Nzinga was one of Africa's strongest leaders. She fought against Portuguese control for almost 40 years. She looked at the photograph again. And you say this woman from 1888 in Virginia carries that blood? That is what the evidence shows, Maya answered. Patricia was quiet for a while. Do we have any names or other details on the photo? Maya shook her head. Only the studio stamp. I have been checking Richmond records, but without names it is very hard. Patricia opened her laptop and searched her own database. I know that studio. John Morrison took many portraits of black families and kept good records. She typed quickly and found an entry. September 14th, 1888. Family portrait with 6 people. Listed as the Thomas family. There is an address. 412 Clay Street, Richmond. Maya leaned forward. That must be them. Same date. Same number of people. Patricia's face softened. They wanted to be remembered. Maya traveled to Richmond on a gray Thursday. She went straight to the Library of Virginia to look at old city directories and census records. A librarian brought her the materials from the 1880s. She started with the 1888 directory and found 412 Clay Street, listed under Samuel Thomas. Carpenter. She wrote it down carefully. Next, she checked the 1880 census and located Samuel Thomas, age 24, black carpenter, born in Virginia. His wife was Grace Thomas, age 22, also born in Virginia. Next to Grace's name, someone had written midwife, healer. The 4 children matched the photo: Robert, Elizabeth, Thomas Jr., and Mary. Under parents' birthplace, most fields were normal. But for Grace's mother, it said unknown, possibly foreign. That note was unusual for a black woman in Virginia at that time. Maya texted Patricia the news. Patricia called back right away. Check the churches. They kept better records for black families. Maya visited several historic black churches. At Ebenezer Baptist Church, the historian Reverend Marcus Williams helped her. In an old ledger from 1875, she found the Thomas children's baptisms and the marriage record from 1874. Samuel Thomas to Grace Oladell. Oladell, the Reverend said. That sounds like a Yoruba name from Nigeria, but many people from Angola received such names during the slave trade. There was also a note about Grace joining the church in 1873. She had special knowledge of healing herbs from her mother, who had died. Grace did not like to talk about her past. Maya returned to Washington with more questions. Back at the Smithsonian, she met with James and Patricia online. James had done more tests on the iris pattern. Patricia had searched old slave ship records. I found something, Patricia said. A ship called the Esperanza arrived in Charleston, South Carolina, in 1847, from Luanda, Angola. It carried enslaved people. There is a note about a woman and her young daughter sold privately. The woman said she was of royal blood. The timing matched. If Grace was born around 1858, her mother could have arrived in 1847. Weeks later, Patricia found more records in the Middleton family papers. The woman's name was Ninga. She claimed to come from the line of Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba. She and her daughter were sold again in 1852 to a plantation near Richmond. In 1858, Nzinga died, giving birth to a girl. That baby was Grace. The older daughter was her half-sister. Maya and Patricia read the letters together. Grace never knew her mother, but she carried the knowledge and the eyes. To prove the connection, they needed living family. Maya traced the Thomas family through later records and found Dorothy Williams in Philadelphia, the great-great-granddaughter of Robert Thomas. When Maya called, Dorothy was moved to hear about the photograph. She agreed to a DNA test. 6 weeks later, Maya, James, and Patricia visited Dorothy and her family. James showed the results. The markers match. You carry the rare genetic signature of the Ndongo royal family. Grace was a direct descendant of Queen Nzinga. about 7 generations later. Dorothy and her family cried as they saw the restored photograph for the first time. "She looks like my grandmother," Dorothy said, "and we always heard stories that we came from kings and queens." 3 months later, more than 40 descendants gathered at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. They stood around the photograph exactly 131 years after it was taken. They shared stories, tools, and memories passed down through the family. An older man showed carpentry tools from Samuel. A young woman named Aaliyah had the same striking eyes as Grace. Dorothy spoke to everyone. Grace never knew the full truth about her mother, but she knew her own strength. She passed that on to us. This picture reminds us that our ancestors were survivors and royalty. No one can take that away. Marcus took a new photo of the whole family together. History had come full circle. They knew who they were.